Well, what's up? How we doing tonight, church? Man, so y'all have been out of school like forever, and I hear like Willie B's on a 2-hour delay in the morning for wind and expected flooding. Okay. Wow. Well, hey, I'm excited you're here. My name's Landon. I'm one of the pastors here at Foothills. Honored that you joined us tonight. I know, man, it's been kind of a crazy week school-wise, and so glad that you are here. And so tonight we are starting a new series that we have on a subject that we've never spoken about in the history of FC students. And I've been really, really excited about sharing these messages with you. And it's on race. It's on bullying, and ultimately it's on the image of God. And I'm so excited to share this with you because, like I said, we've never spoken about that. And here's the idea, just for the entire series before we start out. The idea is, in order for you to be all that God's called you to be, because that's what I want for your life. That's what your leaders want for your life. In order for you to be everything that God's called you to be, then you must be willing to get out of your comfort zone. So during this series, okay, I'm holding nothing back. I'm going to be straight with you. We're going to talk about things we've never spoken about, and we're not going to hold anything back with you all, because here's why. College isn't going to hold anything back for you either, okay? So, like, I don't know if you know this, but one of the number one things people say about Christians, especially when you get out of, like, a Christian bubble where you're, like, surrounded by other Christians, one of the number one things that people say about Christians is that they're racist. And that Christians are racist, and they're hypocritical, and sometimes they can even be bullies to those who are not the majority culture. And so tonight we want to kind of get into really what are we really doing here as Christians, and what do we need to do? And so honestly, for me personally, this is an area that I've had to grow in. Like I've grown up in I went to a privileged white Christian school. Okay, that's where I grew up, kindergarten through 12th grade. And to be honest, during most of the time I was there, I was a bully, okay? I was the guy who could cut you down very quickly, who could say things about you that made you feel very small, and who could just roast you at just about at any time, okay? And so, like, that was me, and I would make fun of people, even people to this day that, like, when I see them, I feel uncomfortable because I know that I caused them a lot of pain probably while I was in middle school and high school. And so this is a subject for me that I know that I've had to grow in, and I'm still growing in. And so I'm not trying to tell you, I'm not trying to talk down to you, because I think we're all on this journey together. But for me growing up, I had a lot of close friends, but those close friends, like close in my neighborhood. And so I have just a picture. These are like my closest friends growing up. Like, this was like when you were like a little kid. Everybody has that friend that you were friends with when you were like really little. This was Elliot. This was my other buddy, Isaac. Isaac, me and him are still friends to this day. This is my best friend, Preston, and this is Pastor Lance, okay? Rocking the cool purple glasses, as you can tell. But these were my friends in high school and elementary school, and really many of these guys I've known my entire life. These were my friends. Now, look at these guys for a second, and there's one thing that they all have in common. They're all white. And when I mean white, I mean like mayonnaise white. Like, we're very white human beings, okay? And so, like, and when you look at my friend group, all of my friends, we all were the same race. We all practiced the same religion. We all went to privileged schools. Just about everybody up there went to a privileged school. We had the same interest. We were all kind of dressed the same. We talked the same. We liked the same jokes. We watched the same shows. Like, we were all pretty much the same. That's just were my friends in all similar backgrounds. So one day, I was probably like 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there. I don't remember. One day, I was at home, and there was a new family that moved in across my street. Now, we lived in a subdivision, in a middle-class subdivision. It was a pretty nice area at the time. And across the road, somebody moved in. When we saw them moving in, they were Vietnamese, okay? So they were very different than everybody else on our block. Everybody else on our street was predominantly a white street. And so they move in next door. Well, one day, my mom, she's vacuuming the living room, and outside of our house, we had a pond sitting in our front yard. It was a small pond. It had koi fish in it. And as a kid, I loved that pond. I named all the fish in it. I fed the fish. I loved that fish pond that sat outside as a little 8-year-old kid. And then my mom looks out the window, and there's literally a boy, a little Vietnamese boy, in the pond pulling my fish out, okay? This is not a joke. Like literally trying to take my koi fish named Robert. I don't know if that was his name. That's just, I don't know. Okay, so I'm like, my mom runs him off with a broom or something. Like, what are you going to do? Like, there's a kid in your pond who doesn't speak English and is trying to steal your pets, okay? So what happened, though, is this kid, his name was Taylor. His name was Taylor Cow. His family was from Vietnam. They'd moved here years prior. And me and Taylor began to strike up a friendship. Now, Taylor and I could not be any more different, except that we both were like this tall and like 10 years old, okay? And I was like this big around too. So I looked like one of those mini Coke cans. And so like we had really nothing in common. Like his family were Buddhist. My family, who was still together at the time, like my family both loved and served God, and his dad was abusive. His mom really didn't speak any English whatsoever. His family didn't speak English. He spoke very little English. He went to more of an inner city school. I went to a privileged private school. There really could not have been much more different than us. And here's the thing about getting to know Taylor. We became best friends, but it wasn't easy becoming best friends with him. Why? Because we were so different. Because to get to know each other made us uncomfortable because we were from such different cultures. So, for example, it made me very uncomfortable when literally one day I come home and out in front of Taylor's yard in a subdivision are like a bunch of chickens, okay? And there's like chickens, and they're not really in a coop. They're just like in like a cage that's like staked into the ground. And then one day Taylor's mom walks out of the house, grabs the chickens, cuts their head off, and makes dinner. Imagine that happening in Cross Creek, okay? Like this is what was happening. So it made me pretty uncomfortable. I'm like, oh, there's bloodstains. What's that from? The chickens that we had for dinner, okay? It made me uncomfortable when I would come up to the door to ask Taylor to come out and hang out with all the guys, and I couldn't really speak any English, or she couldn't really speak any English. It made me very uncomfortable when I would go over to his house and see the holes in his wall from the abusive father that he had. It made me uncomfortable trying to break through a barrier because he had an older brother who was deaf. I didn't have any siblings. We were so different. And trying to get to know his family. It made me extremely uncomfortable. And I'm sure it was uncomfortable for him to come over and drink Starbucks or whatever white people do. Okay? It was very uncomfortable for each other. But it made me uncomfortable going to his grandma's traditional Buddhist funeral, knowing that what we believe about heaven and hell, and knowing what his family believed about heaven and hell, and having to comfort him. It made me uncomfortable. It made me uncomfortable, but I'll be honest, it was one of the best friendships I've ever had. He lives in Memphis now, and he gave his life to Jesus and is actually in ministry, and his life's been changed, and I miss Taylor very much, but he was really one of the best friends I've ever had in my entire life. But those relationships don't always come easy. And because sometimes there's barriers. There's barriers that keep us from getting close easily. It's not impossible to get close. It's just a little bit harder. That barrier may be that this person lives in a different neighborhood than you. And when I say neighborhood, I mean you live in a nice neighborhood that's seen as safe, and they may live in a place that your parents don't see as very safe. Or there may be a barrier to where their first language, their parents speak a different language, and so there's a barrier there. Maybe that barrier is just their culture, the way they do things, the way they dress, the way they talk, the way they live their lives. Maybe it's a religious barrier, and it's hard to get to know that person because their family practices a different religion, or maybe they even practice a different religion. There may be even a sexual orientation barrier, to where they don't have the same sexual identity as you, and they maybe they're gay or they're lesbian or they identify as something else, and there's a barrier, and it's hard to get to know that person. There's barriers. And often it doesn't make it impossible to get to know that person. It just makes it a little more difficult if somebody likes different things than you do, if somebody has a different style than you do, if somebody has a different religion or culture or first language than you. It can sometimes make it harder to get to know each other because whether we like it or not, this is true. We are all more comfortable around people like us. That's just a proven fact. I'm not telling you that you're like a racist because of that is. I'm just saying that this is just a fact. Like, we're more comfortable around people who are like us. Like, for example, I know this isn't true for every single person in the room, but imagine your 3 closest friends. Okay, think about them for a second. I bet they probably practice the same religion as you. I bet that they are potentially the same race as you, and if they're not, maybe they have the same interest as you. Why? Because we're all more comfortable around people who look like us. And so, it doesn't make you a racist. It doesn't make you a bad person. But it just means that those people were the easiest to become friends with, and you stuck together. Now, here's what happens, though. Because it's not necessarily a sinful thing to want to be around people and to enjoy people who are like you. That's not wrong. But if we're only around people who are like us, we miss out on something. And here's what I'm saying. Like, if we're just around people who are like us, then we're missing out on something really stinking big. Or we could say, like, if we don't get out, we miss out. And so tonight, I'm going to show you exactly what we're missing out on. And so if you have your Bibles, I want you to just turn with me to Genesis chapter 1. It's at the very first. If you have a paper Bible, it'll be at the top of your app. A lot of people, especially kind of your generation of people, they kind of can get with what Jesus says, and they like the New Testament, and they like how Jesus lived. But then you kind of flip back to the Old Testament and read some things, and it's like, I don't know if I really vibe with the whole Old Testament thing. Like, I don't really know if God made creation in 7 days. And really kind of your generation is a little skeptical about the Old Testament. And I'll be honest, I understand sometimes why that is. But let me just kind of break down to you what Genesis is, okay? So Genesis is the first book of what's called the Torah. The Torah was the Jewish's history, okay? There was the Jewish history. So the Jewish people believed that God delivered a word to Moses. Moses wrote it down and delivered the law, which is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the Torah, okay? Or you could even grasp that into the rest of the entire Old Testament, which is all of those books. And here's the thing. A lot of people don't really believe in the Old Testament. But they're like, yeah, I'm not vibing with the Old Testament, but I can get with what Jesus says. Well, here's the thing about Jesus. Jesus would one day go and talk about the Old Testament. He would talk about it as fact. Like, he wouldn't talk about it like it was a fairy tale or like a metaphor for life, or it was just like the Jews' history. In fact, he would talk about it like it was very fact. And here's the deal. Jesus, in those same words, predicted his own death and resurrection and then pulled it off, okay? So here's what I'm saying. If you predict your own death and resurrection and then pull it off, I'm going to trust whatever you say. And Jesus talks about the Old Testament all throughout his words that we have well historically documented. So Jesus would refer to Genesis. And so I want to read to you just something that Jesus would approve of, which is Genesis chapter 1. And this is the account where God is creating the world. And he's created the moon and the stars and the sky and the waters, and he begins to create animals. And I want to read to you what this verse says. He says here, verse 24, let earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, creeping things, beasts of the earth, according to their kinds. And it was so. So God creates the animals. 25. God made the beasts of the earth, the lions, the tigers, the elephants, the rhinoceros, the hippopotamus. He creates the beasts of the earth. And then the livestock, the cows, the pigs, the sheep, the goats. He's making all these different things. Everything that creeps, snakes, amphibians, all kinds of reptiles, turtles, bugs, scorpions, all these different things. He's creating the things that creep on the ground and according to its kind. And God saw the animals and said that it was what? Good. So God creates the animals. Then he moves on. He says, and then God said, let us make man in our image and after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over all the livestock and over the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps. So God now switches to create man. And I don't say just man in general. I mean man as mankind, male and female, guys and girls, men and women. And it says in verse 27, it says, so God created man in his own image. Remember that. We're going to talk about that a lot tonight. In the image of God, he created them. He created them male and female. Now, just three quick things I want to just bring out from this passage here, because remember, like I know you maybe you don't believe in like gender roles and stuff like that, like male and female, and maybe that's just like you don't believe that here tonight. Remember, Jesus, the guy who predicted his death and pulled it off, said that this was true. So I'm going to stick with him. Okay, so there's three things I want you to like remember from this tonight. Okay, like God, first off, he makes man different from the animals. So we see this whole, he creates the beast, the livestock, the things that creep on the ground, and then it says, and then he made man. So there's a class and there's another class. You have something that's good and you have something that's even better, which is mankind. So God makes man different from the animals. I know you might love your dog, okay? All right? You got any puppy mamas in here, okay? I'm a puppy mama, okay? Well, my dog was my baby till I had a baby, all right? Then you realize that there's something different from your dog. And I love my dog. He sleeps in my bed, full disclosure, okay? Like, we love Kona. But, man, God made us different than the animals. Number two is this, is that God gives one distinction in mankind. He creates people male and female. So he creates us different, okay? We don't have to have an anatomy lesson to figure that out tonight, okay? There's chromosomal differences. God creates the sex of male and female very differently, and God said that it was good. Then, he also says that God creates mankind, meaning male and female, in his image. So he doesn't make man as like man, you're the best, and then I'm going to make something else. And he doesn't make man to be like, oh, this is my first draft, okay, let's make woman next. Like man was the prototype, okay? He's not doing that. He makes male and female in his own image. So there's no need for like misogyny of men trying to tear down women, and there's no need for feminism of women trying to take over men. There's no need for that, because God makes male and female in his own image. Now, I would say that might be kind of confusing for you of what does it mean to make something into his own image, okay? Now, there was something going around on Instagram several months back, and it was like the old man challenge, where you got the app and you made yourself look like an old man. Y'all remember that? Okay, so this was the picture that I put in. Okay, so I put this picture in, and I actually am wearing the same shirt tonight, which is kind of embarrassing. And then so I didn't know that. And so this is the old man that it made me. Okay, now if I can grow a beard by the time I'm 50, I'm gonna be happy, because all I got right now is a Mario mustache. Okay, so this is the old man Landon. Okay, now I've been told my whole entire life that I look like my dad. Okay, and when I did the old man picture, that confirmed it. This is my dad. Okay, so we're pretty dang similar. Okay, now when the Bible talks about how God creates man in his image, okay, I'm made in the likeness of my Father. Okay, I'm made with certain characteristics that look like my mom and that look like my dad. Okay, now some of y'all are like, don't you dare tell me I look like my mom. Like, she ratchet, okay? Don't tell me that, okay? I don't look like my dad, okay? But here's the truth, y'all, okay? You look like your mom and you look like your dad in some way, okay? This is what God is saying, that he makes us in his own likeness. He makes us to look like him in a way. Now, let's talk about what that means for just a moment, because this is key. We are made to be like God and to reflect our Father. Now, you may not like the way that you look. You may be very insecure about the way that you look. You might wish that you were taller. You might wish that you had more muscles. You might wish that you were thinner. You might wish that you were prettier. You might wish that you looked a certain way and you could be a certain way. But here's the deal. God made you in his image. So whoever you are and whatever you look like, right where you sit tonight, you are reflecting your Father God. That's a beautiful thing. So we're made in his image. You may say, wait, Pastor Landon, hold up. What does it mean I'm made like God? Did you just really say that you look like God? Well, here's what I mean, okay? Like, man is a spiritual person. Man is relational. Man is moral. Man is emotional. Man is creative. Man is loved by God. No other being on the planet, not even the animals, are like that. Because God is creative, God is moral, God is emotional, God is spiritual, God is the epitome of love, and man is made in his image. Now, how valuable do you think God is? Well, of course, God's very valuable. God is not just valuable of $100, $1,000, $1 million, $1 billion, $1 trillion. Like, I think we would all agree that, like, we would pay an infinite amount of value to have God. To have God in our life if there was no other way to get it. I think every single person in this room would say that God is infinitely valuable. So what then does that mean if you were created in His image? In 1787, the U.S., the United States, was determining how the federal government would tax individuals. This is 1787. They essentially said it would be determined by how many people are in your state. That's how they would tax you. So the southern states, of course, did not like this in 1787. Why? Because they possessed slaves. And because this would then tax them for their African slaves who they viewed as property. And so the amendment was made in 1787 called the ThreeFifths Compromise of the Constitution, and it read this. It says, representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may be included within this union, according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding the whole number of free persons, including those bound, so the free persons plus the slaves, to a service for a term of years, and excluding the Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all of the persons. So what essentially this law in the Constitution was saying, that a free man would be a person, but a slaved man would be worth 3/5 of a person. This was signed into the United States constitutional law. They declared African slaves and Caribbean slaves to be 3/5 humans, not as valued as free white men. Now, of course, this is perfectly good, perfectly right, unless you believe that man was made in the image of God. Sure, you can tax however you want, of any type of person you want, no matter what their color or their race, and you can say that yeah, they're worth this amount, unless you believe that every man and woman was made in the infinitely valuable image of our Father. See, if you believe God, who is infinitely valuable, who's made African slaves in His infinitely valuable image, then slaves are not property. They are not tokens. They are not 3/5 of the person. They are image bearers of an infinitely valuable God that they sing spiritual songs about in the cotton fields. See, here's what the image of God means for us. It means that all men and all women of all races, from all nations, and of all skin colors are made in the image of an infinitely valuable God. Therefore, all men and women are infinitely valuable. Now, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure this out, but this is why racism is wrong, and it's evil, and it's from Satan himself. It's because what racism is it says that there's one type of person who's more valuable than another. This is why bullying is wrong. Because what bullying says is, because you don't look like me, you don't have the same waist size as me, you don't have the same stature as me, you don't have whatever as me, that you are not as valuable as me. This is why abortion is evil. It's because abortion says, because the smallest person in the womb is not really a person, they then are not worth anything. But when Jesus, the guy who predicted his own death and resurrection and pulled it off, said that God made male and female in his image, then that gives people infinite value. I mean, this is groundbreaking stuff. Now, I realize it's 2020. And I realize that in many areas of the country, racism may not be what it used to be, but that does not mean that racism is anywhere near being defeated in our nation. And that doesn't mean, and you know this through and through, that does not mean that there isn't bullying that is just ravaging people's hearts. People are shaming girls on social media, and it's leading them to kill themselves and to hurt themselves and to think about themselves in a way that is so damaging. I know it's 2020, but we still have work to be done. And in 2020, I would just imagine that if you're a Christian, you probably believe that. Like, nobody, you're not saying that, oh, this person's not worth as much as me in God's eyes. Like, I can't imagine any of you all coming up to me and say that. But when you drive around with a Confederate flag in the back of your truck, you might as well just put that X right in the middle of that screen. See, here's the deal. You most likely agree with me that men and women, Hispanic, African, Indian, Native American, are made in the image of God and are not 3/5 of a person. But here's what you and I often do, and I'm guilty of this as well, okay? Well, you and I, we often surround ourselves with just people who look like us, who talk like us, who dress like us, who think like us, who have the same skin color as us. And here's the bottom line tonight. See, you're missing out on God if the people around you only look like you. You're missing out on God because people who don't look like you still look like him because they're made in God's image. So if you're only surrounding yourself with other white people from Blount County, then you're missing out on the greatest picture that God has provided for you, which is his likeness. When I was a sophomore in high school, I went on my first mission trip. And we went to Haiti about a year after the earthquake. And it was honestly probably the first place I'd ever been where I wasn't a part of the majority culture. Haitians are Creole, therefore their skin is very dark. And it really, it's a beautiful nation. It's a great, but it's had its struggles and its problems. And we went there a year after the earthquake that decimated the island. And we were in the worst city hit was Port-au-Prince, and we were in a church in Port-au-Prince. It was my first time ever being the minority in church. And the way these people worshiped in the midst of disease, and on our way up to that place, there was a woman laying dead in the road. The way these people worshiped felt a whole lot more like heaven than padded seats on a Wednesday night. Because when I got there and I saw, when they worshiped, they would wave their hands back and forth as their sign of worship. And the pastors wouldn't preach like I would preach. They would more like chant. It would be like, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, da-da-da. And it would stay like that. And it was so intense, but it was so beautiful. And I'm telling you, I got to see more of God in that 1.5, 2 hour worship service than I do many days of my life, even when I am here in America in church. Why? Because I'm seeing that likeness that's not like me. See, these Haitian brothers and sisters of mine knew God in a way that I did not. And if I had never gotten out of my comfort zone, I would have missed out on God. If I didn't get out of my comfort zone to value and love people who are different than me, I wasn't missing out on like a mission trip. I was missing out on knowing God. So I want you to think about this for a second. I'm white, so I'm going to use this as an example, okay? I'm a white American. So as a white American, I represent 2.6% of the global population. Think about that. I know we're Americans, and a lot of times, like, our American bias is to think that the world revolves around America and that, like, we are the center of everything and, like, the moon and the sun are, like, rotating around a bald eagle, okay? I got Leanna on that one. and so, like, I know, but when you think about it, I'm 2.6% of the global population. Now, let's think about this. I'm also a white Tennessean. So as a white Tennessean, I make up 0.00068% of the global population. I'm definitely nowhere near the majority now. I am the great, great minority. Okay, let's think about being in Blount County. Okay, I live in Blount County. I represent 0.00015% of the global population. So if your view of God, okay, think about this. If your view of God is limited only to your predominantly white, Southern American cultural bias, and you never get out of your comfort zone, then you are missing out on 99.999985% of the image of God. And we say, oh yeah, we know God. And I hear this all the time, and it blows me away. I hear people say all the time, like, I'll never go out of the country. I just can't do that. Or I'll even hear people say, like, man, like I just can't get around homeless people. It just makes me too uncomfortable. Or like, I just really struggle with being around people who have special needs, and that just makes me so uncomfortable, I just can't do it. Or I even hear people say, like, man, Knoxville, that's so far away, I can't drive to Knoxville. Or I hear things like, oh, I don't need to go on a mission trip. There's so many problems here. Like, you're going to fly over people who have more problems than you're going to go to. And you kind of have this mindset that you can stay here and never leave here and get to know Jesus. See, if you really want to get to know God, you have to get outside of your comfort zone. Because my bottom line is, you are not just missing out on a cultural experience, you're missing out on God if the people who surround you only look like you. Because whether you like it or not, people who don't look like us still look like Him. And if we want to know what God's like, then we have to be around people made in God's likeness, not our own likeness. And if we don't, we might do something really bad. And here's something bad. I don't know if you've ever seen this in your grandma's house. This is what I like to call white Jesus. Okay? So this was literally in my grandma's house. It's a family heirloom passed down 200 years of white supremacy. So here's white Jesus, okay? White Jesus, he has white people hair, long, flowing, like a horse. I love it. I can make fun of it because I'm white. He has white people eyes, white people nose, white people lips, white skin. And if we're honest and we have any salt to us historically, then we'll know that Jesus probably looked more like an Iranian than an American. We don't like to think that way, do we? We think Jesus is going to come back rocking a MAGA hat. We're like, whoa. Jesus isn't about making any place great. He's about making His own name great. And the real historical Jesus is probably looking more Middle Eastern. He was semi-homeless. He roamed from place to place. And he was a Jewish rabbi. And some of us just think that we know Jesus, but we know this guy. Now, some people are like, man, why are you getting political? I'm not getting political. I'm getting biblical. I'm getting gospel. So here's the deal. What happened is God decided He was going to make man into His own image. Okay? But here's what we did. What we decided to do was we decided, instead of God making man into His own image, what we started to do is we started to make God in our own image. Man made God in His own image. So we started saying, because I look like this, because I talk like this, because these are the people I'm comfortable around, I need to make a Jesus that I'm comfortable with. And listen, a Jesus that you're comfortable with, that looks like you and never offends you, is not Jesus, it's an idol. And idols are made to be crushed, are made to be stomped. And I'm just telling you, like, this is not about just like getting racial diversity. This is not about just like getting equality. This is not just about like it's, yeah, sure, it's all those things. It's not about like experiencing another culture and broadening your horizons. Like, it's not about studying abroad. It's not about those different things. Like this is about knowing the real historical Middle Eastern, semi-homeless, Jewish rabbi Jesus. And if you think the Jesus you follow is always going to follow your politics, or always going to follow like what you've always just been taught to know, you're not following Jesus. And in order to truly know who he is, we have to get outside of our comfort zones and surround ourselves with people who are not like us. So here's my application for you. What does that mean we're going to do? Because you just threw a lot at me, Landon, and I don't even know if I agree with it. That's okay. My challenge for you is this. I can't cover it all. In fact, we're already 10 minutes over. So here's my challenge, okay? What do you do with all this? Well, the challenge is very simple. Come back next week, and we're going to talk about what to do. It's a 2-part message series, and I want everybody to be back next week. Share this on social media, because this is a conversation that we have to have. Because college is going to hold nothing back from you. And I want to make sure that when you get to college, you're following the real Jesus. Let me pray.